Hello, very warm welcome to Fireside Chats. Today's topic is entitled Last Effect, First Cause. The series that you are watching today focuses on the core of spirituality. It looks at the balance between philosophical as well as spiritual integrity. We look at things that affect you, the viewer, on a very personal note. We ask you questions like, what is your relationship with God? Is there any spirituality in your life whatsoever? And by that we mean understanding life and the skills needed to manage life. When it comes to God, is he or she just a name or a concept to you? Or do you have a real, intimate and personal relationship with him? Bearing all of these questions in mind, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Sister Denise, who brings to bear a wealth of spiritual knowledge and experience to the show because she has been practicing Raja Yoga meditation for over 40 years. Sister Denise, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, this is a very curious title, and it links to a previous show that we did on the law of karma. Why is this subject of interest to you, and how does it impact on one's spiritual understanding?
This subject is all about the sort of mathematics of the universe. And not everybody, but a good number of people get preoccupied with this idea that where did it all begin, what caused everything to happen. And in most of the religions, God is considered to be the initiator of the universe and is called the creator. But it's quite difficult for people to think about how things go from there being nothing at all to there being this. So in conventional science, they talk about the Big Bang theory. There was a Big Bang, and then everything has been happening since that Big Bang. And then they say, after a long, long time, many billions of years, about 14 billion years, there'll be another Big Bang, and then everything will not be there. Then there are other people who say, no, it can't be quite that simple, you know. And how does such a Big Bang happen? It has to be caused by something. So then people say, well, it's caused by God. Okay, but then how? You see. And then if there is God prior to the Big Bang, there must be something else there as well. So it's sort of not very satisfactory, really. Now, when we look at the world in terms of cycles, and in terms of everything being caused by something, there being causes and effects, and the effects being the cause for some other effect, and so on. So this is this sort of mathematical process of how everything works in a kind of a mechanistic way, if you will. Then, of course, people say, well, what about consciousness? Where does that come in this? So it's a very deep philosophical, scientific, religious problem, because people have been trying to wrap their minds around it, but with difficulty. And in Brahma Kumaris, there is this concept of identical repetition, which means the whole thing is a closed system as opposed to an open system. So most people who think about the universe, life, the universe and everything,
And time
also, consider it as an open system. Whereas in Brahma Kumaris, we look at everything as a closed system, which means that when you have completed a cycle, the completion of that cycle actually causes the next cycle to begin. So there is a particular period of time that we talk of as the confluence age, where the whole machinery has wound down completely, and then something comes into place which gets it wound up again. And so our understanding of the function of God in the machinery of the universe is to be the factor, the energy, the cause in terms of consciousness, to get everything to go from totally wound down and where the extremes of entropy have been reached, to bring it back again to its beginning point. And this is really what we want to talk about in this show.
Okay. So, Sister Denise, how does that understanding impact on the way one lives one's daily life? Do you do you factor it into the way you process, the way you speak, the way you behave, or is it just something that you tuck away in the library of your own intellect?
No, it does have a bearing on how you feel on a daily basis, because the thing that is deepest in a person's mind as a matter of concern is, what if I die? You know, a person is concerned about their existence and it ceasing to be, not only their own but their loved ones as well. So, in spirituality, it is said that the soul is eternal and immortal. And then the soul passes through the cycle of time. And in the process of doing that, the energy of the soul is getting used and depleted until it reaches an extreme point, whereupon an energy has to come into the machine to bring it from the extreme nadir, the lowest point, up to its zenith, the highest point. And that is really the function of God, and the energy of God does that. And this is why God is called in Latin as Deus ex machina, the energy, the being that is not part of the machine, but from outside impacts the machine and, as it were, resets the whole thing, so that we start off again and we go through the whole cycle again. So when you present such an idea to someone, the first reaction is, well, what's the point? As always, people say this, what's the point? And the reason I think people say, what's the point, is because of the mentality. Most people's mentality is you start somewhere over here and you go to somewhere over there, and that gives you a sense of purpose. But if you look at it from another angle, you could just as easily say, well, what's the point of that? So we have to look a little deeper. What's the point of going from the lowest point to the highest point, and then going again to the lowest point, and then going to the highest point? So the idea of doing something again and again escapes people's sense of coherence, a sense of logic. So you have to look at it with different eyes. And this concern that a person has, which is a very deep feeling, a deep desire for immortality, and there's a kind of a troublesome feeling inside that I would like to be immortal, but I know that I'm mortal. And that is a tragedy. Whereas spirituality says, well, you are mortal in the sense that, of course, you will die, but you're immortal in the sense that your soul can never be destroyed. This is known. And you will appear again and again and again. You cannot die. So then you have to kind of pull yourself back and try to position yourself with the same perspective as the perspective of God, that is one who is outside the machinery, so that you can look at the machine and see it for what it is. And you can look at yourself and see yourself for what you are, that you come into the machine, you move through the machine, you come out of the machine. So then the question is, what happens in the machine? In any cycle, any circle, you could take any point, doesn't matter where you start, and say, okay, that point I'm going to take as the beginning point. And from that point, usually people will take the highest point. They say, that's the beginning point, that's the best, that's my perfection. And then you gradually lose until you become the darkest point, the lowest point, the weakest point. And in fact, this transition between your weakest state, your darkest state, your state of absolute ignorance and suffering and all of this, to your highest point, you will say that period of time is really the creation time. That is the time when you become your true self, you become your fullness. That is the time where you are impacted upon by God. You see, that is the time when every soul on earth has their individual encounter with God, which leaves an indelible impact on the soul, and which is like a kind of driving force for everything that happens subsequently, and which even causes the soul to be a seeker and look for God again. When all of that has been lost, you seek that which brought you to your perfection once again. So it's a kind of a story of achieving God, attaining from God, enjoying the attainment, then using that up, losing everything, looking for it again. And that whole story is the amazing story of humanity and God, the story of me, the story of us. And it, when you go into the depth of it, it gives meaning to everything, it puts everything in place. And then you need to see the continuity of that circle, the identical repetition of that circle, which allows you to actually lift yourself off and see the whole thing, because then you can see the totality of yourself. And I think that, not for everybody of course, but certainly for me, certainly for many people, I really want to know exactly who I am, everything about myself. And I want to know exactly what is the way in which I and God interact in this whole thing, because this is where you're going to find meaning. And I think ultimately, for many people, to have meaning is everything.
Mr. Denise, there are a variety of souls on the planet vis-a-vis God. There is a percentage who love and idolize God. There's a percentage who like God. There is a group who whose only job is to ask God for X, Y, and Z. Then there are those who pretend to love God, and then there are those who hate God. Okay? Does every single human being on the planet, whether they call themselves theists or atheists or anything in between, does every single human being on the planet have a connection to God? Is he that well networked as far as humanity is concerned, whether we on earth are oblivious of that? Not?
Yes. Every soul has an encounter with God. And
Sorry, that wasn't my question. My question, I'd like to know more about what you just said, because it's also interesting. My question is every soul related to God in some way?
yes.
Okay, so your answer is yes.
Yes.
And how does
Because-
that play out?
Well, every soul is a child of God.
Mm.
Every soul is a son of God. Every soul must receive an inheritance from God. And that inheritance is the thing that sets them on their journey of life. Some souls take many lives, some souls only one. There's a huge variety. And every soul will experience God differently. And that is the wonder of the individuality of every soul. And more than anyone, God knows each and every soul and the individuality of each and every soul, the perfection of each and every soul, which is different from each and every other soul, and the dark side of each and every soul. And God's relationship with every soul is, I love my children and I want to be in relationship with them so that each one of my children can reach their perfection, take their inheritance, and enjoy that happiness. This is really God's relationship with every soul. And I think God is particularly interested in atheists.
Now that is a conundrum if I've ever heard one. Why?
I think because a person will decide there is no God on the basis of existing information about God that is presented either by the scientific community or the different religious communities, and they will say that it doesn't satisfy me, it cannot be like that, therefore they reject. So I think from God's angle, the atheist is the one who really thinks about it. And therefore God is, I think, very interested to come in contact with someone who really thinks about it so that there can be a full discussion, so that God can present to the atheist, well, you know, this is me, this is who I am, can you see me?
So what you're saying is, as far as the atheists are concerned, they are simply did not buy that which humanity sold to them at this point in their lives as regards who God is and what He is.
Yes.
So it's a temporary state.
I would say so, because of the fact that every soul, you know, first of all, a person exists, right? A person exists indefinitely. That means the person continues to exist through all of the changes that occur in time. Now, when you operate on the basis of sense perception, you cannot imagine or feel what things were like thousands of years ago. All you can do is look at fossils or whatever and extrapolate from that, but you cannot feel the atmosphere or the energy. And you cannot imagine, because you don't have enough information, what was it like to be me when I was full of all of my spiritual energy to capacity, and now that I'm empty. You know, a soul is often compared with a battery. You know, when the battery is flat, it doesn't light up anything.
Mm-hmm.
A powerful battery is just as flat as a weak battery when it's flat. As you start to charge, then the powerful battery takes much more of a charge, and then the light from that battery or the energy from that battery is enormous in comparison with a little one.
Mm.
But you never really know the differentiation when all the batteries are flat.
Mm.
So at the moment in humanity, everybody's pretty much running on empty. And you don't really know your capacity until you start to fill. And you don't start to feel until you come into relationship with God. And so I suppose the people who would come into relationship with God at the time when God becomes really active are the ones who are high capacity souls, and also those who are actively looking for God, and I think also who have within a sense of the criteria, because the encounter with God, or the finding of God, or the God finding you, however you want to put it, involves recognition. You see, so if you say, okay, I'm looking for God, or I'm looking for truth, how do you know when you find it? Well, it will correspond to some inner criteria which you will want to check out through various different mechanisms that you come up with, and then if everything checks out, then you'll find some more and see if that checks out too, because to find what you're looking for, to find truth, to find meaning, to find the answers which you might not be able to define the questions for, is something that's so deep in souls, because of the fact that souls had self-realization, they had a state of enlightenment, they had that perfection, and they lost it. So you cannot look for something that you never had, you can only look for something that you lost. And so if there is a search for meaning, a search for that source, it means you had it. And if you had it, then when did you have it? And how did you get it? And again, all of these questions actually bring you into something much more circular than the linear thinking that we're used to through the materialistic approach to the thinking process.
Sister Denise, you said earlier that all souls are connected to God, and He is our Father and Mother. Mm-hmm. Why is it that most of us walk around with such an orphan mentality?
Well, when you lost your parents, you're an orphan.
So
you had
lost
parents.
is a question of consciousness, awareness, perspective?
Connectedness. If you are, say, a child with both parents at home and you're in good relationship with them, then you feel things are right. If you're at home, your parents are at home but not much, both parents are working, you don't have much of an encounter with them, you're raised by a maid or a friend or a grandmother or whatever, you're not an orphan, but you might as well be. Then there are those who actually lose their parents get killed or die or abandon them or something, and then you are an orphan because something happened to break your physical connection with your parents. But people take their identity from their parents. People take their position in society from their parents. They take their how they fit in this world is very much connected with that. You know, people's identity is you are the son of so-and-so, the daughter of so-and-so. Even it goes further, you are the mother of so-and-so. But from the angle of being a soul is always a child of God. But you don't know who God is, you don't know where God is, you don't even know whether God is there. And if somebody tells you God is something that you don't buy, then that makes you even more of an orphan, because you have to be self-reliant. There isn't anybody out there looking after you, and so you have to create your own system of morality based on something inside you. But then where did you get that from in the first place, you see? So you're cut off from that. And sometimes it's said that because people are cut off from their connection to God, they're also cut off from the qualities of God, the meaningfulness of God, truth, all of these things And this is what makes people violent.
Okay, on that intense note, we have to say goodbye to you because of a limited time factor, but this talk has been extremely educational, and I think far too few people in the world know that irrespective of who and where they are, they're connected to God. I think far too few people know that. So there you have it. Sister Denise sharing in this topic of cause and effect brought us home to the aspect of how deeply we are connected to God, whether we realize it or not. And she states that this is the time in humanity where one can actually reforge, reconnect with God in a very intimate manner, so that we accept and able to receive everything that God is giving us. So I hope that you've taken today's message to heart, and I hope it changes your life for the better in some way. Thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye.